See if it works. Wow.
It does.
Hey, we are live, I believe.
I believe so.
All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to my interview series called Exploring Genuine Transformation. Just very briefly, this is a show where I interview different coaches, thought leaders, therapists, spiritual teachers on the topic of transformation. And one of the reasons that I created this show is because I was interested as I entered into the coaching world more, how much emphasis there was on gaining mastery over things and over self, as well as, this emphasis on getting what you want in life. And I was very curious to talk with people who are interested in the leading edge of transformation as a different kind of transformation that's about being more of yourself, having more intimacy with life, being more of who you truly are, other kinds of inner transformation. And so I have had the honor and privilege of interviewing many different people on many different topics. I'm really excited today to be here with Veroni. And we are going to be exploring the topic of distorted sovereignty in the spiritual community. In my opinion, this is an extremely important topic. And I think Veroni has a very beautiful and simple way of sharing about this topic and sharing about the work that she does with others in supporting their true sovereignty and freedom. And this is what we're going to get into in the show today. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so excited that we're having this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Yeah. Feels timely in a lot of different ways, and we'll get into that as we get going. So I just want to give, for those of you who don't know Veroni, and I've been so blessed to know her well, and also get a chance to work with her directly and experience her magic. So I'm particularly excited to, share, have you be on here and people be able to experience you and your transmission and, what you're offering to the world, what you offer to others. So she is a shamanic seer and awakening guide. And, basically the heart of Veroni's work is really supporting both men and women to experience more sovereignty and more freedom. And one of the ways that I know you, Veroni, define sovereignty is this kind of, is being able to, is that everyone is equal, no matter what it is that who we are and what we choose and what we want in our lives. That that's part of what being sovereign is that we get to, when we are fully free, we do get to choose that, and that there's no path that's any better than any other path. And so, yeah, I know that that's at the heart of your teachings. And let me see if there's anything else we'll get into that in a moment. We're already kind of starting the interview, but I guess just to say that she was a former top tier attorney and executive coach, and, has had quite a spiritual journey and spiritual awakening that maybe we'll get into in this talk. Yeah, and she's just been dedicated to, supporting others to break free of all of the conditioning on all the different levels, because there's such and I'm sure we'll get into this, but there's such like deep and subtle conditioning that we all carry. Even when we think that we're free, you know, I think we keep hitting deeper layers of like, wow, I didn't realize that I was, that was a place that I was actually had swallowed something that actually wasn't true for me, and, you know, wasn't aligned. So yeah, so that's a little bit about you. And I think actually that just starts I mean, that's just starts where we want to start, you know, which is basically just hearing from you about what, well, it probably actually would be a good place to start. I mean, I was going to say what sovereignty truly is, but I think it probably is a good place to, it's good to start with, you know, what is, like, how would you define distorted sovereignty, and how are you seeing it in the spiritual community, you know, as you, yeah, like in the last, I'm guessing in the last couple of years, but, you know, speak to that. That would be great.
Yeah. Thank you for that introduction. It's always beautiful to hear yourself reflected by another. Distorted sovereignty. What really struck me was when you just spoke about equality and how, like, this is truly how I see the world and how I experience the world, where everyone is completely equal. And there is no one truth, there is no one path, there is no hierarchy, there is no I am better than you because I have been on a path for longer, or the way that I view the world is better and you should be seeing the world that I see it, basically. And I think a lot of the distortion comes in from people who believe that they have the absolute truth, and that the way that they experience the world is the way that everyone should be experiencing it. And then what happens when people are looking for the truth, when they are fresh on an awakening path, or even when they've been on it for a long time and they resonate with something that someone else says, is that they start believing that their truth is the truth. So to me, what I've experienced and what I've seen is the moment that you try to find freedom by following someone else's truth, by definition, you cannot be free. Because there's a unique essence, there's a unique truth that lives in each and every one of us that is not better or worse than another, but it's unique to everyone. And our true freedom lies in following that uniqueness, right? And following the voice of our own heart that changes in every single moment. And the moment that we believe, or are made to believe, that someone else has the truth or someone else has the path, we give away a part of this uniqueness that automatically also takes away our freedom and our sovereignty. So for me, a lot of the distortion comes from people that claim I have the truth, and comes from people that follow those that claim that they have the truth.
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, you just really defined it so simply. This is one of the things that I love about you, is that you have this, and appreciate, is that you have this very like direct way. I'm almost like, well, the interview's over. We just defined it. You basically defined you know, what like the true, you know, what the true sovereign path is, or what it would truly mean to be free, which is not kind of internalizing and taking on all the dogma and the doctrines that we hear. And, you know, more just staying true to ourselves, regardless of what that is. And
even this, I find difficult, because even my truth, like, this is my truth, this is how I view the world, and this is how I experience sovereignty, which again might be very different for other people. So
yeah,
I've become so careful with what I share, with what I say, because I don't want to claim that I have the truth or that I have the single path. My only invitation is for everyone to find their own.
Yeah, so that's really an interesting, well, God, there's so many different directions we could go. I mean, I want to come back to this, and I think I'm going to hold it, this kind of getting deeper into what you just said, you know, how we can actually how we can actually even communicate, even as leaders, right? And even as coaches or working with other people, how we can communicate and support in a way that actually allows for the other person's sovereignty and freedom. I mean, I think, and it can come down to even like, how are we using language, and how are we, you know, is it an invitation, or is it like, this is the truth, you know, and you need to believe it.
Yeah.
But I think I was also curious to go back to like, I'd love to hear, because I know that this is like a big, sorry everyone, I'm pretty tired right now. I just need to be really truthful. I'm like, my brain is not functioning in the way that it normally does. um, yeah, and that's just me being true to myself in this moment, right? Like, I could keep going and being like, everything's fine, but I'm feeling a little, you know, a little tired, a little off. So I think I still am really curious for you to share more about how you see, maybe even giving some examples, how you see sovereignty being distorted in different spiritual communities, you know, whether you see it online or whether you see it, you know, from certain teachers. Because I'd love for you to define this, because I think for a lot of people watching this, and a lot of people interested in this topic, there's people are seeing, like, people are aware that this is happening. There's, you know, starting to be kind of an awareness of it. And it would be great. I mean, I'd love to hear from you, just, and I could even probably share some too, but what are some of, where are you seeing this? What are you seeing? What are some of the subtleties of how it plays out?
Mm-hmm.
For people to be aware in their own experience as well.
Yeah. I think in general, in the world, there are a lot of people who desire power and control on all levels, on all different categories of society, and all different groups, like on all different levels of this material realm. There are people who desire control, right? Going from politicians to business people to groups that most people don't know anything about, to spiritual leaders and coaches and healers. And there's something that happens when people wake up, which I already find a difficult thing, because it creates a hierarchy to those that are asleep and are awake. And I really don't believe in that at all. Let's just say people who experience the world in a different way than the majority of people, is that for those people who have an awakening and who start seeing and experiencing the world in a different way, and maybe even start discovering gifts that they have that aren't considered to be normal either. Quite often what happens is that they start to feel special, right? I see it in a different way, or I can see right through people, or I can do energy work with people, or I can see what their blockages are, whatever it may be, and that makes me special. And because I am special, my truth must be more important than another's truth. Mm-hmm. And these people, most of the time, most of them, because come from a genuine place of wanting to be of service, that come from a genuine place of wanting to be loving and spreading truth and spreading awakening, or spreading whatever it is that they actually believe it. So they come from a place of truth. For them, the dangerous thing that creeps in is when you grow in awareness, and when you grow on this path, is that the ego grows with you. Mm-hmm. And this is something that so many people miss. They think, okay, the more awake I become, the less big my ego is, right? That's how it has to be, because the more of myself I uncover, the more of my ego dies. Whereas what I've actually seen and how I've experienced it is that actually the more awake people are, the more the ego can actually grow, because they are no longer looking at it. There is an assumption that because I am awake, because I have these gifts, because I come from love, because I want to spread light, my ego must be like going down. But actually, they're not looking at it anymore. So it's just like doing its thing in the background, being completely safe and free. And there's this process where people stop looking at their shadow. And that is when the shadow starts like playing and seeping through all the beautiful love and light stuff that they're also doing. And this shadow then starts working through them creating this distortion of control and creating this distortion of I have the single absolute truth, which for those people who are working with these people, or for people who are listening to their messages or who are reading what they're reading, is very confusing. Because what you see on the external, what you see on the surface is love. And what you see on the surface is light and is transparency. But what you don't see is this ego that is working in the shadow that has created a distortion in the person itself over being better than the other, over having the truth, over seeing things in a better, more higher way than other people see it. And because this is so confusing for people that are watching and are seeing their light side, it is very, very easy to lose yourself in another person. And it is very, very easy to listen to every single thing the other person says. And their message will probably be like 95% love and light and truth and transparency. But the 5% that is the control, that desires the control, that is the hidden ego, lures people in to give away a little bit more of their sovereignty. Like every single time, please, I know the truth, follow me. I know the truth, follow me. I know the truth, follow me. And when you're not paying attention, and when you're looking at the light, and when you're looking at the love, and you're looking at a message that resonates, then it is so hard to not give away those little pieces of yourself that are actually your true sovereignty. So this, like the main distortion that I see is so incredibly, what's the word? Not sensitive, but it's so difficult to spot, and it's so difficult to see. And I think for a lot of people, it's okay to be in that space for some time, to like follow other people's truth, to like be absorbed. But there also comes a point when it's time to find your own truth again. And to go, okay, now I've learned, I've spent years or months learning so much from so many different people, and that's great. And now what is my actual truth? And now who am I actually as a true sovereign being? Like what is all this stuff that I've seen from other people? What does it actually really mean to me? What is my own feeling on it? What is my own opinion on it? Mm-hmm. And that shift is a shift that a lot of people don't ever make. A lot of people stay stuck in the realm of following other people, of constantly absorbing more and more and more books, more teachers, more seminars, more coaches, more healers. And it's like this constant, never-ending cycle of having to absorb more, which means that they are missing the actual truth and the freedom that already lives inside of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. It also strikes me that I mean, it's also that we're all so different as beings. And so for those who maybe have more of a tendency to kind of want to follow, or, you know, who are like, I need the other in this way, that, you know, then it's like, it's sort of discerning that, you know, because everybody's path could also look so different in that realm. Like, it's like, okay, wow, I have this tendency. So how do I take this in and then also always come back to self? You know, but then I think people can get on the side, and this is actually what you're speaking of kind of like when leaders become kind of, they're overshadowing their ego, or we would call it, you know, they become more narcissistic. You know, that then it's like a need. That's the other side of it, is like, you know, I'm so enamored by my own, you know, self and my own teachings and what I believe to be the truth in my path, that, you know, I'm actually not open to the sort of other realities, or, you know, that are also present, and other people's direct experience. Right. Yeah. Because we're also so prone. I mean, yeah. I'll stop there.
Yeah. And that happens a lot. And that's where also the non-equality comes in. Like for me, it's such a big red flag the moment I see someone thinking that they are better than another. And to me, it really doesn't matter how far along this path you are, or how many followers you have, or how much money you make, or how many books you've written. Like the moment someone thinks they are better than another and their truth is the actual truth and people should be listening to it, is the moment that all my alarm bells go off.
Yeah.
Because to me, that means that you haven't understood what this is actually about. And it means that you haven't understood that everyone has a unique message, a unique voice, a unique path, and a unique medicine that is as needed as anyone else's. And this is so difficult, right? Because most people, when you see someone who is famous or is well known in the spiritual community, or who has written a lot of books, or organizes retreats and has tons of followers, the moment you see that, most people think, oh, this person must have something to offer. And this must be someone really special that I must follow. But is that actually true?
Well, I'm only laughing because I actually feel so not the opposite, but like sometimes I go on Instagram and I'm just like, these people have a lot of followers because they've developed a lot of followers. I mean, I'm not even talking about spiritual teachers. It's like, I'm like, this person's not even, this person's like, this person's not even actually, they don't even really have a message, but they have all these followers, right? So it's a good indication of sort of what happens, is that we kind of get behind somebody or something, and you're speaking about it specifically in the spiritual community, and then we kind of leave ourselves. We're like, and we stop wondering or being curious about, okay, is this something that I'm aligned to? Is this something that feels right for me?
It's that, right? It's the moment that you kind of forget about yourself and get lost in someone else, or get lost in a group, or get lost in a movement, that you kind of stop checking in with the self. But is this actually really true for me? Does this actually feel in alignment? Do I actually agree with this? And like, we move out of our own body. And the moment you move out of your own body, the moment you move out of your consciousness, is the moment that you lose your freedom, is the moment that you lose your sovereignty, because you're like surrendering yourself to this collective mush of other people who are following a specific teaching or a specific teacher or whatever it may be. And stop actually listening to, what do I truly believe about this? There's something I read, I don't remember the exact quote, but it's something along the lines of, for most people, it's so much more comfortable to be wrong with the group than to be right by themselves.
Yeah.
So true to me.
This is so alive in our world right now, with all the different sort of, I mean, even like the debate, let's say, around like masks, like, are they, should one wear one, should one not? Like, what does it mean? What it means to one person, it means something different. And then, this kind of like, if you're not in this camp, then what's wrong with you? And,
But like, even masks, or I find vaccines even more fascinating. When you look at vaccines in the spiritual community, by default, you're supposed to be anti-vaccine when you consider yourself a spiritual or woke person. Or that's a default assumption. But is that actually really true for everyone who considers themselves a spiritual person? There's almost this shame around these topics, that you're not allowed to be different or think different or do things that aren't woke or aren't spiritual. But where is the freedom, and where is the truth in that for each and every person?
Yeah. Or, and you and I have talked about this before, like, I feel like one of my versions of that has been like, I'm supposed to be fully sovereign in order to be in the kind of relationship I want with a man, versus like, okay, what if I actually just feel like sovereign in the sense of, independent and completely don't need anybody, and like in my own energy all the time, this kind of like almost unrealistic thing, right? Instead of just, and then getting in touch with like, what is actually true for me? What is it that I actually want? And, I actually do want a need or an interdependence with a man. So I think these are some of the things that, I mean, that's another topic that I see actually quite a bit
Oh,
amongst women,
yes.
you know,
Yes.
and especially like, oh, to be spiritual means that I'm, extremely in my own energy all the time. And I'm, I don't, I mean, yeah. And I don't need another.
Yeah. I think like the moment you are trying to do or be someone because someone has told you, or a community has told you, or a collective has told you that that's how you need to do or be, is
Mm-hmm.
the moment that you are not free.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? It's the moment that there's been a distortion or a misunderstanding on what actual freedom or sovereignty is. Like, how can sovereignty mean that everyone has to act in a certain way?
Yeah.
That there
Well,
is
what
a cut way to be. There is no sovereignty in that.
Yeah. Yeah. What's really interesting is that you are stressing, it's you, so they're obviously in the spirit, in spiritual communities and in sort of new age spirituality or whatever we want to call it. I do think that there's obviously there's a movement towards, I see this at least, like there's a movement towards um, I think there's a collective consciousness, we could say, towards certain belief systems and certain concepts, and that's what we're talking about, really. When you say like the moment that you're told this or that you're made to believe, um, I think it's something that's very insidious, and it's not something that's like always said directly outright. And I also think what you spoke to at the beginning is really important, which is that it's it it also happens. We all have to work with our egos. We all have to work with, I like that you use the word ego versus like what I would call narcissism, because I think we all also have to work with our narcissism, because thinking that one is better or worse is actually a form of narcissism. Even when you think that you're worse than somebody, there's a sense of comparison, right? And we deal with that as humans. And I think that that's something that, when you were speaking before, I just had a lot of compassion for just all of us as humans, because I think it's very challenging to get out of the game of better and worse.
Yeah.
It's something that we all kind of, even I think most of us do subtly, without even knowing that we're doing it. And of course, then it happens in spirituality. So I like that you use the word ego, but I think also then, right, like we have to be. Some of us are more vulnerable. Some people are more vulnerable than others to kind of hearing a message and then getting allured by it and losing themselves. And some of us are more vulnerable to kind of highly, like I would say, like some leaders are more vulnerable to taking their power and running with it without even really realizing that they're doing it, in part because then there's other parts, in my opinion, there's other parts of self, from a psychological perspective, you could say, where they haven't actually, they haven't, it's kind of like what you, that's why I like that you use the word ego, because where one hasn't actually worked with those ego parts, right? They haven't worked with being a grounded human who, has these young child parts or has, wounds, and you called it shadows, that actually need to be worked with. And so that's where we're also saying is like, that's what an integrated leader is, right? Or that's what an integrated spiritual practice would be.
Yeah.
Is actually inviting all parts of self, welcoming all parts of self, not making, the love and the light better than the like, wow, I'm in the depths of despair today, and what's it like to just, or, I feel absolutely destroyed today, or I'm in this kind of young trauma part. It's inviting all of it in, and it's acknowledging all of it. So I
Yeah.
see that as also being part of like what the sovereign path is, and what truly being free is that we can recognize all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that we're not afraid or don't shy away from anything. I think sometimes there's this a fear of looking at the shadow, or a fear of looking at these wounds, that the moment I look at them, I lose my light, or I lose my love, or whatever it may be. or I lose my shadow, where what actually happens is the moment that you look at it and you integrate it, you become more whole and you're able to experience even more light and more truth and more transparency and more power in a very healthy, aligned way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so I mean, I was just brought that in, but how do you see that as being part of the sovereign path, or being, being able to be truly free when you can work with these parts and actually integrate the shadow?
Basically, what comes up for me, how that is sovereign, is that when you are able to do that, and when you're willing to look at all pieces of yourself and integrate them and hold them, is the moment that you can let go of the fixing mentality. Is the moment that you can let go of, there is something wrong with me and I need to go to someone else to get it fixed. Or there is something wrong with me and I need to learn more because the way that I am right now is not okay. Mm-hmm. Or there is something wrong with me and I cannot step into my service, or I cannot step into my offering until I have fixed everything. The moment that you are able to look at every single part of yourself and let it be and honor it and accept it and walk with it, is the moment that you can let go of that endless fixing loop of there always being something more to be uncovered. And this is also something that is really played upon in, again, when we talk about the distortion in the community. This is something that is really played upon by so many coaches and healers and spiritual teachers, is talking to these wounds and talking to the parts of people that feel that they're not good enough yet, that they're not complete, that they have stuff to work on, and talking to these wounds to keep them stuck in this loop of forever working on themselves, spending more money on coaches and healers, and like being constantly in a never-ending loop of trying to get somewhere, to a point where they're finally finished and like finally arrived. Whereas that is never ending. Mm-hmm. And there is no freedom to be found in that, because there is no end, and there will always be a feeling of being incomplete and having to do more stuff and needing other people who are supposedly complete, who can help you get there. But that's a fallacy. It doesn't exist. So for me, what you're speaking about is one of the ways to get more freedom in self and get more sovereignty in self, is to accept yourself as a flawed human being.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is to not strive to be some perfect version that some people portray themselves to be, to not strive to be this perfectly only loving, always completely in alignment, always in service, always completely awake version that, let's say, for 99.99% of the people is not what they are meant to be doing in this lifetime. But to actually rest in the humanness. Yeah. And to find wholeness in that, and to find freedom and sovereignty in that, to stop outsourcing the self to other people and teachings.
Mm-hmm. So beautifully said.
Yeah. And this is, I think we've spoken about it before. This is something that sometimes really sets me off when I see coaches and healers and spiritual teachers taking advantage of people, of this wound in so many people, yeah, of the wound of not feeling complete or not feeling good enough, and how people literally write sales texts that speak towards these wounds to activate this even more, to activate the feeling of I'm not good enough even more, to then get people to continuously be in this loop and to spend more money and spend more money and spend more money. And every time they do that, to not step into their full sovereign being and to step into their full sovereign self and their own truth and their own service and their own offering. It can really, really set me off when I see people do that, knowing very well that most people do this from a genuine desire to serve and a genuine desire to bring more love and awareness into the world, but it's just so incredibly distorted to me as well.
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, even the last part of what you're saying, because right, like there's an emphasis, even, I mean, with in the coaching world, at least, that's, you know, focusing on people's pain points and sort of what they want, right? And often those pain points are like what you don't have, and when you finally have this, and
Yeah.
you know, when you get that, then you're finally going to feel what you want to feel, and you're finally going to have what you want to have. And it's, you know, I think
Yeah.
it can take away from like, you know, it's actually a really good example in some way because, um, you know, and I know that this is how you work and it's also how I work. It's like allowing people, I mean, even when I choose people, I'm like this. I'm just like, who intuitively feels good for me?
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
rarely about because I think that they're going to actually, you know, have the answer, or that they're going to, you know, get me to where I want to be. Although in my case, as you know, like I did that for many years, which is why I do the work that I do now, helping people to stop, you know, stop feeling like they're a perpetual self-improvement project, similar to what you're speaking to.
Yeah.
But so I think I, like in my particular experience, I got burnt out because I saw that kind of sort of striving and seeking was actually it in my case, it didn't actually work out to give me what I actually wanted.
No.
For some people it does, and so they stay on the train. It's like, okay, now there's the next thing, now there's the next thing.
Mm-hmm. Which if it works for them is great.
Yeah.
But can it not come from an empowered place rather than a speaking to people's weakness place?
Yeah. Yeah.
That is my genuine question. And I mean, my experiences, and perhaps I'm lucky in this, but I actually believe it can be like this for everyone, is that those people that come to me to work with me, they never come to me with a specific question. They never come to me with a specific goal or something they want to work on. They literally all come to me going, I know there's something to be discovered between us, and I have absolutely no idea what it is, but I'm going to trust it.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I love
It's the
that.
only thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
And from that place, you can truly open to magic. From that place, you can truly open to the transformation that comes from joy, and that comes from enthusiasm, that comes from excitement, that comes from absolute alignment, rather than from a mind going, there is something wrong with me and I need to fix it, or there is something that I don't have and I want to have it.
Yeah.
That when you step into a relationship with someone who is of service to you from a complete open space, from a complete trusted and surrendered space, then you can let life unfold, and you can let the journey unfold, and you can surrender just in trust and in enjoyment. I mean, and that's been my experience. That's how it works for me. I'm not going to say that's how it works for everyone, but I do want to put out the question, for those people who are writing those sales texts and who are working in that way, isn't there a more empowered way to do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting. It's a great question because it's like, yeah, when you said that before about like what's empowering, right? And I think what we're really speaking to is, and I mean, there's two sides of this, and you name this, right? There's what's empowering, and what we're speaking to is, you know, that it's for what we're both saying, it's like it feels more empowering to actually kind of help people to step into who they truly are, right? And to step into, let's say, working with working, let's say in your case, like working with you from a place of genuine trust, and like, okay, there's something that's, I'm not actually pulling on your you know, I'm not pulling on like your heartstrings or the parts of you that you know, are your pain. And if we go back to sovereignty, we kind of went in an interesting direction, right? And you said this before, there may be people that like that feels genuine for them, because to write that kind of sales text, because that's, they you know, they want to serve people who they don't really believe will come in that way.
Yeah.
And that might be truthful.
Yeah.
It might be true for them. So it's
Absolutely.
interesting, like any topic. What I love about this and where we got to too is like, and you and I have talked about this outside of this interview, is that anything that we, anytime we, you know, anything that we like anytime we put any concept around anything, it can become kind of like, okay, now this is the truth, right? And
Yeah.
so it's constantly, the way I see it, it's constantly like having to, it's like constantly speaking. And I think we can, you know, one can speak with authority. I have a teacher who does this right now that I love. She speaks all the time on Facebook Lives, and she says exactly what she sees in the field, and exactly what she sees happening. And then she's like, and explore it for yourself. Like, don't just take my word for it. Like, you know, what is your truth? And so you can also, right, that's what feels real for her. And
Yeah.
and it lands well personally for me, because I don't ever feel her saying, this is exactly like, I know the way, even though she's speaking with quite a bit of authority about what she is experiencing and
Yeah.
what she sees happening in the world. So it's an interesting,
it's so like, I've gone through long periods of not posting anything because of exactly this, because I'm like, well, okay, this is how I'm seeing it and this is how I'm experiencing it, but I know that there is not one truth. And that there is so many different truths, and this is just the way that I'm experiencing the world. So I've like had periods of not posting anything because I didn't want to portray this idea that my truth is the truth, or this is the only way to see it. Also knowing that also my truth changes constantly, right? This is also what we've spoken about, is a moment that something becomes a concept, whether it's an external concept or an internal concept, and there is a loss of freedom and loss of sovereignty and a loss of flow of life. Because the moment you crystallize something, it turns into stagnation, and stagnation equals death. So the moment we take on a concept or a belief and go and say, okay, this is it, and this is now what I believe, and this is how it's going to be forever, is the moment that there is a loss of freedom and life. So this has been such a personal thing for me to like navigate this. Okay, how do I actually go out into the world to share what it is that I experience and to share what it is that I see without it turning into a concept and without it turning into a single truth?
And at the same time, this is a very interesting topic, because one of the things that I've seen some people post about that I actually I respect and I understand and make sense to me is people are saying, you know, not everything is subjective. Like, there are actually things happening in the world, like, systemic racism, for example, like that is happening. That's something that is happening in our world and is not a positive thing, right? And so I think that the key here, right, and this, so it's not, is like, when is sort of maybe what I said before, which is somebody speaking their truth and that being true for them, and yet they're also being, and again, maybe this is me speaking to what I think, you know, it, right? Again, it's a concept, but I'll speak it anyway. But, you know, being able to speak that, I mean, this is at least my internal experience of it, or what I perceive from others that feels good to me when it doesn't become crystallized. It's like, oh, this is that person's experience. They're speaking this, and there's space around it. There's something about the curiosity and the like, and the spaciousness and the like, okay, this feels true. Or in my own daily life, this feels true for me right now.
Yes.
And so that was actually the other thing that I really wanted to bring up earlier, and it's coming back, is that, you know, we're talking about it in the spiritual community. We're talking about it amongst leadership, and, you know, we did talk a little bit about how we, you know, each of us internalize it. But you know, and you were really speaking about kind of people taking power and using it in that way, and also sort of unconsciously or consciously, you know, wanting others to think a certain way, and sort of pulling on the collective, you know, the collective sort of mind or consciousness to experience it that way, which I think is happening a lot, and that's insidious in our world. And I also see it, I mean, the thing that I'm also extremely curious about, because I see this in my own direct experience all the time, is the way that we're all doing that for ourselves internally, you know, moment to moment. And it's been one of the things in my own life that has been probably the most challenging, because it's like, I have an epiphany, or I feel something, or something feels like, oh, this is it. Like, this is why I'm struggling in this way in my life, or, this is why I'm unhappy, whatever. I mean, that could be
Yeah.
one example of it. And it's just that moment, right? Or maybe for a period of time that feels true, but how do I continue? I'm always asking myself the question, and I think this does relate to like how we are sovereign and free. How do I be in the moment to moment experience of my life, allowing what is emerging in the field and emerging in my consciousness and emerging in life to just like to keep dancing and playing with that, like to keep that being like a living, breathing, experience, that I'm not all of a sudden like, oh, now this is the answer.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we all have our different relationships to that. And obviously there's a strong collective component around it. And I'm sure that that's, in part where mine came from, but I also see it so individually and, it being such a sort of personal thing. And I'm sure other people can relate to that. So I don't know, that just strikes me as like a huge part of this conversation, right? Because I mean, one of the things that has struck me even in my own life and is that I've seen myself over the years as someone who actually like really knows who I am and speaks my truth and, is pretty discerning. And yet the way that this still plays out in my life is, is still, it's still there. And I'm still always seeing deepening layers of like, oh, wow, that's another place where I was like holding on to this concept, or, where I was feeling like this is the truth. And then I was strangling myself with it, or, creating a concept, or, not allowing for my fullness and for the truth of my experience, or seeing a way that I actually, was swallowing a belief system that actually didn't even feel true for me.
Yeah.
And so it's so deep. Like I mean, we said this at the beginning, but I'm just, yeah.
It is so incredibly deep, and I've seen this in myself as well, constantly. One thing that I'm grateful for is that life, pretty much every time I do that, slaps me in the face instantly. The moment that I go, now I've got it, and this is the way that it is, always something happens that just completely wipes that out. And I'm like, okay, I just don't have a clue again. But what I see where this comes from is also related to this fixing mentality, and is related to the idea that we are going somewhere, right? That you're on a journey, and that there will be an end point where you will have completed the journey. And that there is like, we're on this journey, and along the journey we need to like find all these clues to get to the end point, to finally be complete and have completed the mission and the task, and then we're good. So at any point along this journey where you go and think, now I've got it, our mind wants that, because when we actually truly get it, then we can rest, and then we can allow ourselves to be complete. Whereas that whole idea of this journey, and this whole idea of going somewhere, having to arrive, that is all a concept of the mind. And it's the mind keeping us busy in this perpetual cycle of constantly having to prove and seek and change ourselves. Whereas when you go to what for me is the actual truth, is that there is life, and we are a part of life, and life is constantly changing and expanding. And we are a part of that. So that being said, how can there ever be an end point? Like, what's the end point of life then? Is life moving in a certain way to come to a certain point of completion, to go, now I'm finally done, now I've got it? No, life is just continually changing and expanding and moving, and we're a part of that. So there is nowhere to go, and there is nowhere to get to. So relaxation and rest can actually happen in this very moment, in this very instant. Which can bring incredible amounts of peace. But that requires a full surrender of the mind that always wants to be working and seeking and exploring, and not being good enough and having to be better, and not being able to accept what is currently here. So this is on such an incredibly deep layer of the beingness of pretty much every single person on the planet. And it's so covert, and it's so part of how we've been conditioned to exist. It's so tricky.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I'm just taking in what you're saying. Yeah. Hmm. Well, and then it makes, so then I'm going to ask you, like, I'm trying to keep the thread of the sovereignty, and I'm like, okay, so, because what you're describing right now to me is, and what I was also describing is also part of the spiritual journey. I mean, it is the spiritual journey. It's the true, I mean, true spiritual journey. I can't say that. For somebody else, it would be a completely different spiritual journey. Um, it's actually great to even be in this conversation in this way. Like, I noticed that this interview is, it's almost felt somewhat, I don't want to say choppy, but like almost like, because we come up with ideas and then we see, oh, wait, that's a way that I'm actually crystallizing something into a concept, or into, like, because I see it this way, you know, I think that that now it sounds like I'm telling somebody else, we're telling whatever, I'm telling the people watching this that if they have a different
Yes.
experience of that, then somehow it's not what true sovereignty is. And what we're trying to get to the bottom of, right? Or what we're not to the bottom of, but what we're exploring here is, what does it actually mean to be sovereign? And, you and I are right now, I think, exploring what that is in a sort of moment to moment way. How do we not take on a self? How do we not crystallize into something?
Mm-hmm.
But it could be for somebody else that, having a, like, I think sometimes people's paths are like I was describing of this teacher, mentor of mine, it's like her path, I think, really is like, this is what I see as the truth, right? And so that's what's true for her.
Yeah.
That's what feels freeing for her. So it's, and
Yeah.
I think we both have certain ideas in our own lives of what, I know for me, I have ideas of, like, you know, um, I have ideas of how I want to live. I have ideas of, certain things that I'm like, this is what I see as a better way to relate, right? Which doesn't mean that, I think part of the path for me, at least, is like, okay, this is what's true for me, and this way what might be true and what I want in my close relationships. But I think we can come back to what you said at the beginning, that everyone's equal. So it doesn't, I think for me at least, the path is then acknowledging and loving people as they are. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, well, this is how this person is. This is how they, are, but I still have the boundary, or I still, I'm going to live in the way that I want to live. And that might mean that I don't want to be connected to them in a deep way, but
Yes.
I can still appreciate them. I can still, and to me, that's also giving people, not putting ourselves above or below people, I think is a way of,
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm defining it. I'll just name that. But it's giving people, I think it's also, to me, that is also what true sovereignty is. It's like, I'm
Yeah.
allowing you to be you.
Yeah.
Um, mhm.
And like, it's not making, in relating, not making another wrong for how they are, or not making another wrong because you don't feel good in relating to them, but actually going, you're exactly how you're supposed to be. There's nothing wrong with you. It just doesn't feel good to me, so I'm going to go another way.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
the way that this is doesn't feel good to me. Can we have a conversation about it? Not because you're wrong, or not because you don't see the truth, but just because it doesn't feel good to me. Can we find a way to have it feel good to both of us?
Mhm. Yeah, and I think another example of this, which is happening right now, is there's people who are, there's people talking online about, like, please don't disrespect me on my page. So they're putting up a boundary saying, I will block you. And,
Mm-hmm.
or there's people saying, why do you get, other people are saying, why, what, I don't see the need, I don't see why people are making it such a big deal, or why people are blocking people, or why we can't just have a conversation. But the truth is that, I mean, this is where it gets kind of complicated, right? Because we're all so different. So how do we respect each other in that and allow people to be as they are? And then
Yeah.
I think we're also then free to make better choices. I think that's,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right, because that's kind of what you're also describing. It's like, okay, well, maybe the way that this person's, kind of approaching something doesn't land well in my body. I can wish them well. I can, kind of let them be as they are, and then I can take care of myself, and and connect with the people that do feel more in alignment.
Yeah.
Then I'm
So
letting it be free. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not making the other wrong for how they are being, but also not making yourself wrong for how you're feeling.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and
and
sorry, this is so, I love what we're exploring. I want to say for myself, and this is also the work I've been doing with the women I've been working with, but I've been feeling this more and more in myself, is that the more I am in touch with who I truly am, what I truly want in a moment to moment way, and I'm not making myself wrong, and I'm not trying to be someone other than I am or feel something other than I feel, the more sovereign I truly feel and the more free I feel. And then I'm finding that I feel so settled in me, and I'm then more of a true expression of who I am. And life does, for me at least, this is what's been happening. Life then is flowing more, and no matter what's happening in my life, I'm often feeling at peace because I'm feeling just good because I'm being in me, because I'm being true to me. And I think I'm glad that that came in, because I think the kind of intricacy with self, the moment to moment connection, um, and the kind of not making oneself wrong, like, well, actually, this is what's true for me. This is what feels good. Okay, so this is what I'm going to follow. Um, actually leads us to we feel better in ourselves, we feel more of ourselves, and we end up feeling more free.
yeah.
And we end up, I think, making others wrong less as well.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
like when you are freeing yourself and when you're willing to look at all parts of yourself and accept yourself exactly for how you are and not make yourself wrong about it, then the need to make others wrong also dies, because you no longer need to place yourself above another to feel good, because you already are good. Right. So this whole hierarchical thinking and this whole, where do I stand in the hierarchy, and am I better or worse than this person, or am I doing something wrong, or are they doing wrong? That all dies when there is a trust and a peace in self. And you're able to see yourself as fully whole and complete, then you can see every other person as fully whole and complete too, and not make them wrong for anything.
Beautiful. I mean, what you just said, and I think it's probably a good note to end on, but it's sovereignty and freedom as wholeness.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's kind of a wholeness that can happen.
Wholeness, just being in you.
Yeah.
Where there is already everything.
And then we can let the world be and others be exactly as they are. And then, which doesn't mean that we don't do anything, but it means that we choose the things that feel right for us, And I think also we choose them. I mean, in my view, we also make more change for this world.
Yeah.
From that place, because we're acting from that place of truth.
Yeah. I think the more people are becoming whole, when you go to like the most macro level of us all being one, then the more everyone becomes whole, the more the field and the collective is able to become whole as one. So you're doing everyone a service by coming back to your own wholeness and to your own completion and to your own self.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, we covered a lot in this in this interview, and I would call it more, to some extent, a conversation. And it's really interesting because it sort of feels to me, I mean, I've said it throughout the interview, but that this is a very, very complex topic, and I think to some extent I'm appreciating kind of what we did here, because there's a way that we used words to explain it, and we also kind of in the moment got to see the places where things can become crystallized, right?
Yeah.
And even that for some people might be, like I said, like some people their sovereign path may be to live with like, this is what I believe to be the truth. And I'm going to stick with this truth and I'm going to keep communicating it. And that's what's true for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
but this is like, it's so multi-layered because it's like sovereignty and oneness are so, they go together. And it's like the essence of all the work that we're doing here on this planet. So there's so many layers to it, and it's so complicated and so interesting to dive into.
And the oneness piece in this context is that you're using that word to say like the oneness, meaning we respect and care for all of life. Like we don't, it's back to kind of the equality thing. We're not putting ourselves above or below, and we're acknowledging that we're all part of one, human diverse family. That there's,
I mean, there's so many layers of oneness, but this is the layer that's like most on the material realm, where just being, we are all one, we are all equal, we are all the same. And then on a higher realm, it's the more whole I become, the more I'm serving the unified field and allowing everyone to become more whole and everyone to come back to actual oneness.
Beautiful. Which again is just a name, is also like your sovereign, right? Like that's your sovereign path. And like, that's
absolutely.
But I will say, I mean, I want to know as we end, like I want people to know how they can kind of follow you and find your work and also the work that you're doing. And I will say one thing that I know, because I have had the chance to work with Ferroni, that one of the things that I really feel like you, that you really walk this talk, even in how you work with people, of sovereignty, of truly like listening and always coming back to like what is true for this person. And I find it so refreshing because I don't ever feel like there's like kind of a dogma from you. And in fact, there's often a sort of seeing the deeper layer of how one is actually, or in my experience, at least I can speak from my experience, taking on like even a subtle sort of concept or truth that isn't true for me, and naming that. And so getting to see all those like deeper layers and break through that conditioning. So,
I'm so glad to hear that. That's exactly what it's interesting about my work, how I've told you this before, how my work is so incredibly different with every single person. Like so incredibly different. And there was a time where I questioned myself, where like, shouldn't I be finding like a particular way to be, or like, shouldn't I be putting myself in a specific niche? Until I realized that that's exactly not what I want to do, because my purpose or my goal, and also the work that moves through me, is meeting everyone exactly where they're at. And in a way, translating everyone's higher truth, their own unique higher truth for them. So not placing any of my own ideas or beliefs or dogmas or conditioning upon another, but to purely be in a complete state of transparency, serving the other person and speaking to their truth and reading what's present in their field. Which is why there's like every single session with every person is completely different. But yeah, this is always the basis.
And again, I want to speak to something which is cool about what you just said, is that, and I have experienced with you personally that, your stuff isn't coming into that, but I also think that that's part of that is because you're doing the work to have that stuff not come in. And, or I think as part of, in my opinion, part of being any kind of a sort of healer or coach or whatever leader is being able to speak to those parts when they do come in. Wow, this really isn't, I'm trying to be as transparent as possible, and this really isn't, wow, this may have been a place where, some of my own stuff came in, because we are so human. So I mean, I think you do have a particular gift with that, but I want to speak to that because as we kind of, because I think we want, the purpose of this conversation is to move outside of, um, yeah, I think is to call out the kind of spiritual teachers and leaders where there's just a sense of like, I'm just being with you and holding space, it's like, because that is also a place where there can be some, what's the word? Where that kind of, can't think of the word right now, but where that kind of lack of sovereignty can come in,
Mm-hmm.
and people's freedom can, I think, be taken away because it's like, yeah.
It's
So it's
where
about,
people are in a most vulnerable place where they completely open themselves and their field to another, where it's
yeah.
where conditioning can really seep in without you really realizing it. And that's why it's been so incredibly important for me to so I'm constantly checking myself on to not make myself believe like I have the truth.
Yeah. 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 Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's humbling oneself, which I think you absolutely do, that if someone were to come to you and say, one of your clients, like, oh yeah, this didn't feel true for me. I mean, I think actually I've done that before. And then, it's like immediately it's like, oh, okay, well, isn't the truth, yeah, well, this is the truth of experience. So let's dive into that. Let's like really look at that. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I'd love for you to share how people can follow you, learn more about your work, and also what you offer
Mm-hmm.
in terms of your
So
work.
people can follow me here on Facebook and on Instagram. My handle is V being free. I'll type it in the comments just in case someone wants to follow
Yeah,
me.
sure.
And on my website, which is also in my Facebook page, which is my name, Filoni Anika. I vary online presence, but you can find me there. And how I work with people is I work with people on longer periods of time, mostly 3 or 4 months or 6 months, in a container that can be whatever it needs to be. I always find it so difficult to describe what it is exactly that I do, just because of what we just discussed, because it's so different for every single person. But it can be a combination from going really deep into shamanic realms, really being a mentorship, coaching, healing, teaching, and usually it's a combination of all modalities, so to say, where I just really let move through me what needs to move through me in the moment. And like I said before, most people come to me really because they're like, there is something that is to be discovered between us, but I don't know what it is. And that's exactly how I love to work. So I kind of dive into the mystery with everyone, and on a weekly basis, just see what is there to unfold, which in general is a lot of magic and unexpected things and deeper discovery of truth and self and gifts and freedom. So you can read a little bit more on my website and on my pages for that, and find me if you're one of those people who thinks there's something there but I don't know what it is.
I love that. Yeah, thank you. I think that was a great, yeah, I think that was a great way of talking about your work, having been someone who's worked with you. So thank you, everyone. This turned out to be somewhat of a long interview, exploring lots of different realms related to sovereignty and catching ourselves also in anything that, started to become like crystallized into some kind of, truth that, so hopefully it was helpful to everyone, kind of our journey through this and what we shared here. And yeah, I'm really appreciative of, your wisdom and the specific work you're doing, Brony, around, sovereignty and freedom. Yeah, I think it's really, you have a very unique way, I think, of working with it and really catching, those places where one is kind of in it isn't free in themselves. So thank you so much. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This show happens every week. It usually happens on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific time, and I bring on um, all different kinds of people and different topics, and I put all of these on YouTube because it's much easier to access them there. So eventually, this will go on YouTube. My name again is, I don't actually think I introduced myself at the beginning, but my name's Lori Beth. And yeah, I have a couple of programs going on. I do a 3, 6, or 9 month mentorship, and I'm working with highly sensitive, intuitive women who, and providing all different kinds of spiritual, somatic, and therapeutic tools to support them and stop being an endless self-improvement project and really getting to enjoy their life now. And similar to Veroni, I mean, I'm using a lot of different skill sets, and it's very different with each person. So I'm working with women on all levels of their being and with whatever is needed, whatever, honoring what they want, and kind of combining lots of different tools to resolve trauma and to be more free, while also kind of sticking with what the particular woman is wanting in her life, like, both in sort of internal and external realms, we could say. So if you're interested in that program, please reach out to me. And I'll also be doing a group program that will be a real deep dive for women. So I'll be announcing that soon. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and thank you, Veroni.
Thank you so much, Lori, and for everyone watching.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.